So we're going to talk about popology, something new, exciting, and different. This is my colleague, the CEO of Popology.
Oscar.
This is Oscar. And so he's going to be maybe taking some photos or videos, so don't let him bother. I'm going to do the same for him. And he will be bringing up the rear of my presentation at 5:10. So what we don't cover here, Oscar is going to make sure we get at 5:10. So don't go to dinner too soon, okay, before you get the whole presentation. So we're going to bring media literacy, mental wellness, and cognitive neuroscience together. 3 topics very important to me.
Has never
Magic
been more
fingers.
pressing.
Yeah.
Media literacy for a healthier culture. So much of what we see in today's media isn't real. It's curated, airbrushed, algorithmically manipulated, and yet it affects us deeply.
Was this shot in perfect light, pro makeup, pro retouch? Is the pose a rib and hip trick, elbows back, chin down? Are the proportions human if the arm looks like rubber, hello, warped?
That's what I was asking you.
Does a brand profit when I feel less than? If yes, I slow down and breathe.
Psychologists and neuroscientists have long shown how over-glamorized images and unrealistic portrayals in media fuel comparison, insecurity, and self-doubt. These constant pressures create what we call culture dis-ease, a cycle where people measure their worth against impossible standards. For young people especially, this often leads to anxiety, low confidence, and a distorted sense of self. But here's the truth. The problem isn't within us. It's in the media we consume.
Navigating pop culture can be overwhelming. Many students feel lost amidst the noise and misinformation.
And that's where media literacy steps in. Enter Popology. Popology is not just a platform. It's an educational and cultural tool designed to flip the script. Through our patented PopSphere, students, scholars, and everyday users learn to compare content across multiple platforms side by side, identify bias, manipulation, and hidden agendas, deconstruct harmful stereotypes that feed insecurity, rebuild narratives that are empowering, authentic, and diverse. Instead of internalizing negative comparisons, Popology trains us to turn the critical lens outward, onto the media itself. The question shifts from what's wrong with me to what's being portrayed and why. The impact? For students, Popology builds critical thinking and confidence in self-expression. Students become citizen journalists, storytellers, and media authors, not passive consumers.
Popology offers lessons that ignite curiosity and foster collaboration among students.
For scholars, it provides data-driven insights into how culture shapes identity and how identity shapes culture. For patients and practitioners, in counseling or therapeutic settings, Popology helps individuals step back from harmful comparisons and see themselves in a holistic view of culture, equipped with tools to engage with media in a healthier way.
Am I rested? Am I kind to myself? Who benefits from my comparison? What's one thing I like that isn't about looks? Who can I talk to today? Parents, practice it out loud. Educators, practice it out loud. Clinicians, practice it out loud.
Why it matters? Every podcast created, every critical question asked, every stereotype challenged adds to a new kind of digital ecosystem, one that values truth, creativity, and inclusivity. Popology empowers people to see culture clearly, think critically, and do something positive with their voice. Because when we understand media, we don't just consume it, we change it. And in changing media, we heal culture.
Empowered by the platform, students begin to find their voices and share their stories. Through Popology, students emerge as critical consumers of media and advocates for equity and mental wellness.
Popology. See, think, do.
So it's about empowerment, taking a behavior and an activity that students, in this case, are going to do anyway, or individuals who reach out and purchase self-help books for those who want to have some sort of natural control over their own environment in terms of how they seek health and wellness. And so we want to set the stage in terms of why this dis-ease culture exists. Many of you probably have young people, if not your children or your grandchildren, or people that you may teach as a professor, that you know are spending a lot of time on social media, doing a lot of things, and there's no controls. They can access almost anything. Some of it is damaging, and some of it is hurtful. Some of it sends negative messages about themselves to themselves. But that search is insatiable. So looking at how do we provide tools that protect both minds and communities, because individuals make up larger communities of the societies we're teaching. So cognitive overload, anxiety, polarization. Have you ever seen any of those things in any of your students? Of course you have, right? But what do they do about it, right? Disinformation and toxic feeds. We live in a society of disinformation. How does a young person navigate that? How do they figure out what is healthy for them, as opposed to following the crowd? And then that insatiable, that need to just keep engulfing and taking in information. We want to rise, and we want to make sure that young people can rise above their vulnerabilities, growing mental health burden. Now, this I can tell you, as a clinical psychologist and a forensic psychologist that works both in an educational field and in the world, I'm able to combine and connect what's happening in the real world with what's happening in the classroom, with what's happening in people's homes and in the community. And there is an increase in behavioral health challenge. Behavioral health, in my mind, is mental health and substance use disorder, right? So that's the important piece that we're going to do. So, introducing Popology. You saw the video. I won't repeat everything that you heard on the video. But what we're doing, looking at educational utility, media literacy curriculum, critical thinking narrative, and empowerment. You heard me talk about empowerment. Have you ever asked your students about how to improve their critical thinking? Isn't that what every professor wants? To teach their students how to think critically? Isn't that what you want from your children and your grandchildren, right? Making good decisions that helps them through the next life. We all make mistakes, but we don't want our children, our grandchildren, the people we teach, to make that critical mistake that is life-changing. And so looking at health and wellness platform, preventative digital tool, curated ecosystems, transparency, all of this is what Popology allows. And then there's a citizen journalism piece in the blockchain, authentic, inclusive, measurable engagement. We can track this, they can track it themselves to see their progress and see how they're doing. And they can then navigate more as they curate more healthy outcomes. And so media as a curriculum and health and wellness as an intervention actually supports young people's education, learning, but also their mental health. And so the visual glossary, if you will, we look at the science of what's popular. And Oscar's going to talk even more detail about this later, but what's popular, that's what they're looking at, right? And so we have meta search for safe curated content, right, as we just said. Creator, clinician, curated video streams so that we can actually help people navigate health. Peer streams, shared trackable learning journeys. You know, they like to interact with one another, young people, right? But so do we not? Because human beings are what? Interdependent. We need each other, right? No man, no woman is an island. No one stands alone. And so this allows a safer way of doing this because they're online anyway, right? And so the public trust literature, blockchain-based transparency and accountability allows there to be accountability. And so what is the neuroscience? Why media literacy equals cognitive health? We won't go into the details of brain function. That's remedial for this audience. But it's important for us to point out that the strengths in the critical thinking part is the prefrontal cortex, right? You remember those back in your undergrad and your grad days, right? When they talked about the prefrontal cortex and what that is. That's very important. It's also our decision making, right? And then we have the emotional regulation, right? That amygdala, right? What I can tell you is that when we think about that group, that 10 to 16, and then that 16 to 24. Think about it. Your brain continues to develop even past adolescence, even into your early 20s, right? And so that emotional regulation is important. Why? Because young people whose brains are still developing, they make decisions based on their emotions, the amygdala, right? Adults make decisions based on the executive function, right? And we probably all know a few adults who's still operating as teenagers, right? Well, something's going on. So empathy, amplifying diverse voices fosters pro-social cognition, right? We need some pro-social cognition today in what's going on in the world, right? The neuroplasticity and resilience, that flexibility, especially as young people's brains develop and grow. Curated engagement rewrites adaptive learning pathways, right? It becomes proactive and protective. And then we have our attention and memory networks, which reduces the overload and builds refocus. We're doing good on time. So in terms of education and curation as curriculum, this is what we're doing, okay? Critical thinking by design. Students learn discernment through curation. They're doing it anyway, so why not help them with the healthy part? Resilient learners protects against harmful media influence. That storytelling piece is so important. I often tell my students, never let anyone tell your story. Your self-narrative is so important. It's who you are, it's how you see yourself, but it's also how you can present yourself to the world, right? And that's what a lot of young folks are doing. That's why that peer pressure is so important, right? Never let anyone tell your story. You can tell your own story and use it in a healthy way. So citizen journalism, share your perspectives, diverse narratives, equity in action. It amplifies marginalized voices. As a clinician, I can tell you one of the main things I try to do with my clients is to make sure that they have a voice. A lot of people that get lost in this world is because they don't think they have a voice, or they've allowed others to speak for them for so long they don't remember that they are themselves an individual person that can speak for themselves. We want transparent outcomes, right? And we want measurable impact. And so POPOLOGY for the neurological and mental wellness side, now this is the clinician side of me as opposed to the education side of me. Personalized psychoeducation, developing your own podcast and delivering skills and practice to the community, practice and community. Transparent trust, we talked about. The cognitive anchors, which supports executive function. That's that development from the amygdala, the emotional, to the executive, right? It reduces reactivity, promotes resilience. Think of reducing reactivity as reducing impulsivity, okay? More stable, what we like to call emotional intelligence, okay? Preventive care, proactive, not reactive. That's so important. You don't want to react everything, but when you're functioning with your amygdala, you're doing a lot of reaction. But when you can get into your executive function, now you can plan ahead. And that's what this allows you to do. Digital hygiene for mental health, we want to promote healthy minds, bodies, and spirits. And so social equity and healing and narratives, media as a public trust. I don't know that we can say that with confidence, but it is possible. It is possible, right? We want to amplify the marginalized voices so we have diversity. Why? Because we're not clones. That's what makes the world so wonderful, right? Think about all you've already enjoyed at Nice and what you're going to enjoy tonight. It's going to be the diversity that you're going to enjoy the most. Being in a new place with new people, with new opportunities. Right? That's what we want our young people to curate. They can do it here, safely. Narrative as invention, storytelling as a community healing. I can tell you, there are communities across the world that have perfected storytelling. I was on a tour yesterday around Nice, and they told me the story of Nice. And it was so interesting. Oscar, you actually gave me a few more details about that story, right? Going back to Rome and how we got here, right? It was fascinating. Inclusive curation lowers stigma and isolation. When you are inclusive, you lower stigma. And that's especially important on my other side, my clinical side, because often mental illness comes with a stigma. And so having mental health, promoting mental health and emotional health actually reduces stigma. Inclusiveness reduces stigma, right? It shifts people into empowered cultural roles as opposed to reacting. So we had problem, we have opportunity, right? I've never seen a problem that didn't have an opportunity. And so I'm not afraid of problems. And I also teach my students, don't be afraid of a problem. Lean in to the problem, because that's where you're gonna find your voice. That's where you're gonna find your success. And so low therapy adherence, curated podcast patients, they actually want to do this. I can't tell how many times I've assigned homework to some of my clinical patients and they like come back the next week. Oh, doc, I'm sorry, yeah, I got busy. Well, we had an outgoing with our family. They didn't do it. And a few students show up every now and then without their homework, right? You can't say the dog ate anymore because we're all using computers, okay? But you get the point. Media overload amplifies anxiety. So many parents have sent their young people to me because they're anxious or they're depressed. My first question is, how much time do they spend on social media? You know the answer. Gamified adherence, POPOLOgy tokens, they can actually earn, right? You've heard of the token economy. Why not use it in a way that motivates students, right? And then limited visibility between sessions, consent-based insights for clinicians, just makes sense, okay? How am I doing on time, Doc?
Oh, perfect.
Perfect, okay.
Just hit the 3-minute warning.
Okay, perfect. Platform overview, the core components. And again, my colleague, Oscar, is gonna hit on these even more detail, but we're gonna curate evidence in our own content. We're not just throwing stuff out there, which is what they have access to now. This is evidence aligned, right? Right now, so many people are kicking science and evidence out the door. Nobody at this conference, but there are people around the world who are demonizing science, okay? Podcasts and peer streams, shared trackable engagement. We can actually see how people are doing. We can actually track outcomes. And then transparent provenance, consent-based use, perfect. So, moving quickly, core clinical cases, clinical use cases, just take a look at this, right? We have our psychoeducation modules, we have our cognitive behavior adjunctive skills practice, we have our cognitive enhancement tracks, right? Our social connection and recovery stories, our caregiver and family wellness. We all need that family wellness. And how many of our students may not have the biological family connect, but they connect in other ways, okay? Therapy workflow integration. I touched on this, I won't hit it, but before session, we have homework. That's actually fun. And then they show up with it, right? Because it's something they're doing anyway. Between sessions, nudges and gamified rewards. Again, that token economy works. And then the care team dashboard, audience adherence, and risk alerts is important. Measures, we can measure all of this. Structured behavior, unstructured, applied. Always transparent, always what we want. Safety, ethics, and compliance, very, very important in the work that we all do, right? So we have that. And then our KPIs, primary outcomes, our secondary outcomes. Remember, reducing stigma, increasing well-being, increasing satisfaction. We have our pilots, we have our randomized controlled trials, our publications, care pathways. Vision, every student resilient against toxic media, every patient supported between therapy sessions, empowered through narrative healing, telling your own story. Thank you for your time.